Hello, everyone. Welcome to this Energy Out West live session, What is a DALY by Paul Raymer. I'm Jeff Wilcox from the Vermont Weatherization Program and a member of the Energy Out West board. I want to introduce our speaker, Paul Raymer, but first a few housekeeping items. So first of all, if you have a question as Paul talks, please enter that in the chat menu on the right. We'll be keeping track of those questions and we'll ask those afterwards. And second of all, after the session, there'll be a link in the chat menu for BPI credits, which will be available. And again, that link will be in the right. So you're at What is a DALY by Paul Raymer. I'm not going to introduce the session other than to say it's on indoor air quality, but I do want to talk about Paul's bio. So Paul Raymer has been working with building science for more than 40 years. He has taught building science courses to diverse audiences, from home inspectors and weatherization specialists to architects and engineers. He is a senior technical specialist with ICF and the chief investigator for Hakoya Solutions and president of the Northeast Building Science Institute. He is the author of the Residential Ventilation Handbook, V2, Recalculating Truth, which is a novel, and Residential QCI Handbook, and has published articles in Northeast Sun, Smart Home Owner, and Home Energy. He was a member of the Lead EA Technical Advisory Subcommittee, BPI's Standards Technical Committee, and is a subcommittee chair for heating, cooling, and ventilation of the NREL SWS. He is a BPI envelope, building analyst, heating professional, AC heat pump, infiltration and duct leakage, and healthy home evaluator certified, and is a certified HERS rater. He is an IREC assessor, IREC certified master trainer, and he is a full member of ASHRAE, 15-year voting member of the 62-2 board. And he is the lead SME for the NREL IREC QCI Micro Credential Development Project. So I'm going to hand it over to Paul. Thanks, Paul.
Thanks, Jeff. Let me see if I can get this going. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff there. See if I can move everybody over here. Oh, can't. Don't want to do that. Trying to move this thing around. It's like new stuff. Hang on 1 second. Brian, can I make this screen with people on it smaller?
You should be able to drag the people around.
I can drag it around, but it's in the way. But anyway, let's try that. All right, thanks, Jeff. And welcome, Paul, to beautiful virtual Austin. I'm Paul Raymer, as Jeff said. My company is Hayoka Solutions, which is located on Cape Cod in Massachusetts. I've been doing this stuff for a long time, and I've been told that I need to get a life. I think about this stuff more than my family would like, so I had to write a book about it. I've been told that it's pretty readable. I must say that I'm flattered that you're all here. I'm sorry I can't see you. Feedback from the people's faces is one of the greatest joys of training. You should know that I'm not an engineer. I don't know enough to be an engineer. Nothing against engineers, but that means I don't have to obey complex mathematical rules. What I know, I've learned by doing, as many of you have, by listening to people like you and by reading stuff. Despite that, I'm going to be telling you some rather complex stuff you probably aren't familiar with. I have taken information from detailed technical papers and tried to change it or transmogrify it like magic into useful terms. My goal is to provide a path to connect ventilation to health and health to dollars. Blowing conditioned air out of the house and sucking unconditioned air back in from the outside may have an energy cost, but we'll look at how that is more than offset by life and health savings. We have always faced the barrier that ventilation doesn't save energy. Well, maybe not, but it saves life years. So what's a DALY? DALYs represent the total number of years lost to illness, disability, or premature death within a given population. A person who has an 80-year lifespan and who gets killed by a bus when he's 20 doesn't have an 80-year lifespan. That sort of unexpected stuff can certainly happen in life. But if he lived to 70 and contracted some disease that puts him in a wheelchair, he's still alive, but the quality of his life has changed. But you have to recognize that DALYs aren't the same on an individual basis. I'm twisting them to get useful personal information out of them. DALYs were conceived of to address population size issues. DALYs are calculated by adding the number of years of life lost to the number of years lived with disability. Years lived with disability, or YLDs, are a measurement of the burden of disease. YLDs, or years lived with disabilities, are calculated by multiplying the prevalence, or how common a disorder is in a population, by the shorter long-term basis of health associated with that disability, which is the disability weight. For example, there's a military base near where I live where they used to shoot lots of weapons and explode lots of things. Chemicals from all the activities seeped into the ground, and cancer is remarkably frequent in the area, and cancer can certainly impact health for years. Some people think that it's the groundwater. Recognizing the impact and verifying the source can be used to determine the disability-adjusted life years for the area, which can then provide a path to a solution. We don't yet have data on the health of the occupants in energy-tight houses. We're just sealing everything up from windows to doors to light fixtures and heating systems. Much of that effort is directed at energy savings, but part of it is to establish control of where the air is coming into the house and where it is leaking out. You want your source of fresh air to be the rose garden and not the garbage cans. But not only are we making houses tighter, we're spending more time in them, particularly now, more than 90%, close to 100% of our time. And that's not just because we're couch potatoes and binge watching Game of Thrones. The fact is that we are compelled to breathe the air in the house. And yet we bring all sorts of polluting stuff in, like people, and we cook and have dogs and take showers and paint ceramic vases and fart and light candles and plug air fresheners into wall outlets. People buy air fresheners to cover up all the smells, but the air fresheners themselves are not all that good for the health of the occupants. Toxic chemicals released by air fresheners, particularly those with pine, orange, and lemon scents, are known as volatile organic compounds, or VOCs. These are well-proven toxins, many of which have been linked to a range of diseases and conditions when being inhaled even in low concentrations over a long period of time. Some of these chemicals include benzene, a petroleum-derived chemical which causes cancer in animals and has been linked to leukemia. Xylene, which has been linked to nausea and sick building syndrome, as well as liver and kidney damage. Phenol, which can cause kidney, respiratory, neurological, and skin problems. Aren't you glad you came? Naphthalene, a suspected carcinogen, which has been linked to blood, kidney, and liver problems. And formaldehyde, a colorless, unstable gas. Whoops. Inhaling formaldehyde fumes, even in small amounts, can cause coughing, a sore throat, and respiratory and eye problems. Formaldehyde has been linked to cancer, particularly in the nasal cavity. So now I want you to meet Rufus. We'll call him Rufus DALY. He's an insulation contractor. He's married with 2 children. He's had his good times and his bad times. His health is generally pretty good, and at the moment it's quite good. He has a life expectancy of 79.61 years. How do we know that? There's a website, which I'm going to show you. Where did it go? Sorry about that. There we go. So what you can do here is you can plug in your zip code. Now, Rufus's zip code is 02540. And it pops up that in Barnstable County, where he lives, he has a life expectancy of 79.61 years. Jeff, can you give me your zip code?
Sure. It's 05663.
Let's see what it's like in Vermont. Well, pretty close to the same thing, 79.83.
Interesting.
If I put a New York, Manhattan zip code in, 84. You can live longer in Manhattan than you can in Vermont.
I couldn't.
So that's pretty scary stuff. But what we want to know is how ventilation impacted his life. People don't list fans on their diaries. They don't mention them in their emails. It's hard to tell how Rufus's life has been connected to fans. But since he's imaginary, we can assume that his life with fans has been average. Maybe there have been fans in his bathrooms or a range hood in the kitchen. Maybe he has operated them, but I tend to doubt it if his experience with fans has been average. But even before Rufus was born, there were health risks. Many elements can impact life and health growing up. The fact is that there have been many pollutants in the air he has been breathing over the past 40 years. There may have been mold on his windowsills. Soot stains like these on the carpet could indicate the furnace has been backdrafting, sucking combustion pollutants into the air. There were probably rodents in the attic. Maybe they didn't have a decent ventilation system in the house. People have been pretty blind to ventilation. Maybe a fart fan in the bathroom or a range hood in the kitchen. They get used when it smells. Years ago, I invented a control called a flashostat that's still working quite well in my own bathroom. It turns the fan on automatically. But what if there'd been a smoker in the house? Tobacco smoke contains more than 7,000 chemicals. Third-hand smoke is residual nicotine and other chemicals left on indoor surfaces by tobacco smoke. People are exposed to these chemicals by touching contaminated surfaces or by breathing in the off-gassing from these surfaces. This residue is thought to react with common indoor pollutants to create a toxic mix, including cancer-causing compounds, posing a potential health risk to non-smokers, especially children. Pollutants have different impacts on the human body. and different impacts on different human bodies. People exhale carbon dioxide, but too much of it can cause headaches or breathing difficulties. Carbon monoxide can be deadly rather quickly. Ozone can cause irritation in the respiratory tract. All these things float around in the toxic soup that is the air in Rufus's house. His parents thought that an ionic breeze ozone generator made their air smell like the fresh air after a thunderstorm. They didn't know what impact it would have on the chemicals in the air in the house. That's one of the problems with popular or public issues. Companies pop out with what could be called snake oil or magic solutions, but a careful check on the internet can often turn up solid scientific data. All of those things in Rufus's house blend together in what is known as the exposome. When I first heard that word, I thought it was some kind of fancy trade show, exposome. But it's the conglomeration of all the stuff that impacts our lives. Some of them come from outside and many of them come from things inside. Things are constantly blending and changing in the natural progression of life. Rufus played football in high school. He was a lineman, so his head got banged around. His mother did make him eat his vegetables, but he certainly did enjoy his fast food. Luckily, although he was one of the guys and did try cigarettes, he never got hooked and never moved to vaping. The exposome represents the exposure that we are subjected to throughout our lives and how our bodies respond to these challenges. The exposome is the nurture part of our development, while the genome is the nature part. Nature versus nurture. That old chestnut that is used to explain why we do what we do and why we are what we are. People have recognized the need for ventilation for a very long time, from the cave dwellings where ventilation was needed to get rid of smoke, to the Egyptian stone carvers that needed ventilation to get rid of the dust. Florence Nightingale recognized that patients in the Crimean War healed more quickly when they were in spaces with better ventilation. And Charles I of England decreed that buildings should have high ceilings and windows had to be higher than they were wide. When we look at DALYs, the Europeans used the DALY metric to evaluate the burden of disease for various diseases, from cardiovascular disease to lung cancer. Although this chart doesn't directly connect to ventilation, the causes or components that cause many of these diseases are airborne. And if it's airborne, it can be impacted by ventilation. So ventilation is indirectly connected to all these DALY numbers. By reducing the density of the pollutants in Rufus's house, he can be healthier and more productive, and his life expectancy can be stretched out to meet its expected length. The tricky part is figuring out what the ideal ventilation is in a house. ASHRAE, who is responsible for setting these rates, has tried all sorts of things, as you can see here. So back in 1836, less than 5 CFM was okay. That jumped up to 30 in 1895 and stayed there till 1936, when it dropped back down to 10 CFM. In 1981, it dropped back down to lower 5 again until when it stayed at 15 CFM. But no matter what the rate, it's not zero. Some mechanical ventilation is required. The architects and engineers have battled over whether ventilation was more important for comfort or freedom from noxious odors for you. That's another story. They indirectly connected noxious odors to health, but the bottom line is that mechanical ventilation is important to health, no matter what the rate. The heads can argue over the details all they want. Okay, so this is another hard to grasp concept. We're only about 30% human. The rest is about 2 gallons of bacteria, both good and bad. Good bacteria keeps the bad bacteria in line. Hand sanitizers kill bacteria indiscriminately. If at all possible, it's better to use soap and water. You leave a bacterial signature behind in a room. You have about 5 minutes to rob a house before a forensic microbiologist could discover lots of things about you. Content suitable for a building science murder story, such as my death at the edge of the diamond. We're learning more and more about the microbiomes in houses. Homes are for people, and people shed skin flakes, sneeze, cough, sing, shout, get sick, get healthy, have families, get old, and transmit all of that to the surroundings in the home. It's carried around by heating and cooling systems and the natural pressures that push on the insides and the outside of the house. And as we carefully change the leakage rates in the house and spray air fresheners and burn candles, we're changing the air qualities in the home. We can easily feel the changes in temperature in the house, but we often just accept the changes in relative humidity. Dr. Stephanie Taylor did a correlation study in a long-term care facility where she found the results reflected in this graph. Residents had less pneumonia with controlled humidity, fewer viral outbreaks of pulmonary disease, fewer gastrointestinal infections like norovirus. Skin infections were lower. So keeping the relative humidity between 40 and 60% was very beneficial. 40 and 60%. Dr. Taylor also found that microbes in mechanically ventilated or tight buildings are more closely related to pathogens. In biology, a pathogen is the oldest and in the oldest and broadest sense is anything that can produce disease. A pathogen may also be referred to as an infectious agent or simply a germ. The term pathogen came into use in the 1880s. Typically, the term is used to describe an infectious microorganism or agent, such as a virus, bacterium, protozoan, prion, viroid, or fungus. Sounds like stuff from Star Wars. Tight buildings separate the inside air from the outside air. So a tight building with mechanical ventilation has been shown to have low bacterial diversity and higher pathogenicity as opposed to natural ventilation, which more effectively connects the inside air with the outside air. Wait a second. We've been saying for years, make it tight, ventilate it right. Well, that's still true, but we don't want to cut off the connection in bacterial diversity between the inside and the outside of the house. There needs to be a balance. In the 1918 pandemic, steam radiators were oversized in New York apartments so that the occupants could leave their windows open throughout the year. So this is not new stuff. We've just forgotten. But we're struggling to quantify the improvement by opening windows. We know it's good, but when and how much and which windows and how about the conditions outside? Dr. Stephanie Taylor summarizes it by saying, microbes are all around us. We are more microbial than human, Microbes may need to be diversified in homes and offices. There is a need for controlled, moderate indoor humidity levels, and we need to find the value of human health in buildings. If you get a chance to watch her YouTube video, it's quite remarkable. I had to watch it a bunch of times. So besides the build tight, ventilate right thing, we need to remember that a house is a system and people are systems. People in houses are complex systems that interact and do stuff. We need biodiversity. We can't thrive in a sterile environment. So let's talk about ventilation. We need ventilation for lots of things. It's the movement of air, and there are lots of components to ventilation technology. We need ventilation for the occupants. We need ventilation for appliances like water heaters, furnaces, clothes dryers. And we need air for cooling. Air moves around the house by both natural and mechanical means. In terms of the transfer from the inside to the outside, remember that for 1 cubic foot of air to move out, 1 cubic foot of air has to move in. This is the process of air change. In cold weather, when the house is heated and it's warmer inside than outside, pressure moves air in at the bottom and out at the top. In hot weather with the AC running, the house is cool. It's cooler inside than outside, and the stack effect reverses. You can see the stack effect on this fireplace covered for painting and the black dust stains on the filter glass from cracks and holes in the walls. Tuck under garages have a big hole in them in the form of the garage door. Everything, combustible gases, pesticides, fertilizers, paints, everything that we don't want in the house is stored in the garage. All of those VOCs are driven into the house by the stack effect. I've often suggested we should put the garage on the second floor, but it hasn't been welcomed. Clothes dryers work by sucking the air out of the house. That air has to come back in from somewhere. 1 CFM out equals 1 CFM in, or the clothes just cook. Running the clothes dryer impacts the air movement and the pollutant movements in the house. I'm not saying that's bad. It's just an element of movement or ventilation. Exhaust fans from bathrooms and kitchens need to expel all their humidity to the outside of the building. Remember, we want to keep the relative humidity in the house between 40 and 60%. A major component of pollutant generation comes from cooking. So it's important that the range hood vents all the way to the outside and does not work, as we technical people like to say, as a head greaser, blowing the recirculated exhaust air across the top of your head. If air isn't flowing through the exhaust duct to the outside, birds find them lovely, warm, and dry places to build their nests. When their babies grow up and move out, the little mites that live in the nest come into the house seeking a new home. Break down all the places that ventilation has a role in the house. Whole dwelling ventilation is a system that should run a lot, hopefully all the time. Spot ventilation removes the pollutants at the source, bathrooms and kitchens. They run on demand. Radon ventilation sucks the radon gas out from under the slab. Garage ventilation, code actually requires that there be ventilation from the garage. And attic ventilation. This is an option if you want to store stuff or build an extra bedroom up there. Things continue to outgas long after we bring them into our homes. whether we're there or not. A whole dwelling ventilation system could be a centrally located exhaust fan or a balanced system like a heat recovery or energy recovery ventilator that's installed and programmed and to run correctly. Now, listen, if they're not designed, installed, and programmed correctly, they won't do the job you expect them to do. They'll just hang there looking pretty. Have you ever experienced coming home after a vacation or a long weekend when the house has been closed up? You get smacked in the face from the potatoes that were rotting in the kitchen? Are we making our houses too tight? Well, first you have to ask, too tight for what? If it's too tight for the appliances, they might not work. Appliances like the water heater or the boiler or even the clothes dryer or the range hood. At the same time, it shouldn't be too tight for the occupants because we all need air to breathe. We have to balance our desire for energy efficiency with a need for healthy occupants. Seriously, putting a plastic bag over your head would be way too tight. Spot ventilation takes the polluted air out at the source of the pollution generation. This reduces the path the VOCs might take through the house. When you start frying onions in the kitchen, no matter the size of the house, those smells permeate quickly throughout the house. Range hood fans are extremely important, removing cooking pollutants. I convinced my wife to use our range hood after I put one of these little PM 2.5 monitors near the kitchen. When it started turning orange or red, she got anxious. The particles we're talking about are really, really small. They get past all the security systems in our throat and down into the lungs. There's only a one cell layer separating the lungs from the bloodstream. So some of the really, really small particles can get through and into the blood. Look how small these things are. They're about 25,000 microns in an inch. They're 30 times smaller than a human hair. And this is another way to look at it. This is a PM10 particle, this big boulder here. This is a blood cell. This is PM 2.5, the ones that we've been talking about. This is bacillus bacteria, and this is a SARS virus. That's really small. Let's get back to DALYs. In terms of DALYs, these are the top pollutants. For 90% of the samples taken in one study, acrolein, formaldehyde, and PM 2.5 particles contributed to more than 80% of the DALYs lost. Much of the acrolein and ultrafine particles like PM 2.5 come from cooking. Induction stoves are cleaner than gas or electric coil stoves, as they should have no NOx emissions. Since none of the equipment reaches the high temperature needed to break the molecular nitrogen bonds, and limited data suggests they also have much lower ultrafine particle emissions compared to gas or electric resistance burners. You may not be familiar with acrolein. It is the simplest unsaturated aldehyde. It's a colorless liquid with a piercing acrid smell, the smell of burnt fat, as when cooking oil is heated to its smoke point. It's caused by the glycerol in the burning fat breaking down into acrolein. In addition to fine particle generation, wood smoke contains several toxic air pollutants, including acrolein, benzene, formaldehyde, and polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, or PAHs. There's a term to sling around, polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons. You use that in a cocktail party and see if you have any friends. It's produced industrially from propylene and mainly used as a biocide and a building block for other chemical compounds. Analyzing the above list of diseases and the number of lost years of life due to diseases, it can be concluded that air quality has a significant impact on human health. It's been estimated that the most common diseases cause the loss of 2,129,090 years of Europeans' life. So what we want to do is keep changing the air in the house, known as ACH, or air changes per hour. There's a difference between the effective air change rate and the average air change rate. I learned this years ago from Larry Pallmeiter of Ecotrope. We'll use stinky cheese as our pollutant source and try two different ventilation strategies. One with continuous ventilation for a continuous rate of 0.35 ACH, and a second approach with a low ventilation rate due to building air leakage, with a large fan blowing for an hour to catch up. VOCs hang in the air for a long time, so a strategy of continuous low volume air exchange is preferable to a high volume intermittent rate. Bear with me as we work through some math. System 1 has continuous ventilation at 0.35 air changes per hour, 24 hours a day. So the average ACH is 0.35, okay? No fancy math there. But system 2 has low natural ventilation at 0.22 ACH for 23 hours, and then 1 hour running a fan at 700 CFM to catch up. If you do the math, that works out to an average ACH of 0.35 as well. But I'm not sure I would want a 700 CFM fan running for an hour, but you could do it. On average, the systems are equivalent. But not so fast, my little broomstick cowboy. Let's look at the effective air change rate. For system 1, with the system running 24 hours a day, the average concentration calculates to 2.86 stinky cheeses per volume, which means that the effective air change rate is 0.35, which is the same as the average air change rate. For system 2, because of that extended low volume ventilation, the concentration of stinky cheese is much higher and calculates out to be 4.37 stinky cheese per volume, which means that the effective ACH of system 2 is just 0.23 ACH. So the effective ACH is much lower than the average ACH. Note that we could substitute COVID-19 for stinky cheese. So we want to maintain a continuous effective air change rate for Rufus. Effective ventilation can dilute the pollutants around him. And then if Rufus can get outside and breathe and smell the roses, and maybe get a dog and wear a mask, at least for the time being, it will help his microbiome to thrive and ward off diseases. Kevin Kennedy, you might have heard him yesterday, the wise man from Children's Mercy Hospital in Kansas City, says we need to connect back to our natural surroundings. And Rob Dunn, in his fantastic book, Never Home Alone, said similar stuff. And so does Dr. Stephanie Taylor. A lot of very smart people doing a lot of research and a lot of history connect ventilation to health. But we don't want to kill all the microbes. After all, as Dr. Taylor said, we're mostly bacteria ourselves. Many species are beneficial to us, helping our immune systems to function. They can help control and compete with pathogens and pests, and maybe help ferment new kinds of beers and breads. This is a great book, by the way. So let's look at some dollars. People are commonly productive. Things have certainly changed in the past 6 months, but let's hope we get back to normal productivity. Productivity is the key source of economic growth and competitiveness. A country's ability to improve its standard of living depends almost entirely on its ability to raise its output per worker. In the United States, it's $34.02 per hour. Healthcare and lost productivity costs a lot. $880 billion for healthcare benefits and another $530 billion in lost productivity. This is where we start connecting the DALYs to ventilation to the dollars. In the US, almost 1.4 billion productive days are lost annually because of absent employees. So what do we know, or what can we assume? Well, let's assume that the outdoor air is 75% better than the indoor air. That may not always be true, but it's a place to start. It's essentially where all ventilation systems start. Our source of fresh air has to be better than the air it's replacing. We're going to choose a reasonable effective air change rate of 0.35 ACH. That's not the ACH 50 number you get from a blower door test at 50 pascals, which may be 3 or something even tighter. It's a natural air change rate. What you get when the house is just sitting there doing its thing. Multiply those two numbers together, 0.75 times 0.35 equals 0.2625 or 26.25%. I think we've clearly established that indoor air quality has a direct impact on the health of the occupants. Changing the air, diluting the pollutants will improve health. Some portion of lost productivity, missing work and school days can be attributed to lack of ventilation or regular ACH. And by the way, this is not including the much greater dollars that are spent on healthcare costs. Lost productivity is equal to about $1,608 per employee. So if part of that lost productivity can be attributable to poor indoor air quality, a reasonable number being 26.25%, then we can attribute 26.25% of $1,608 or $422 of lost productivity to a lack of ventilation. I borrowed this slide from Joe Madash and Kevin Kennedy's session yesterday. These are real costs for each visit. Thanks, Joe. Thanks, Kevin. So if we can reduce the frequency of these visits with improved ventilation, that would be a really wonderful thing. So let's bring it all back together. Ventilation dilutes the pollutants. A conservative estimate is that the outdoor air is generally about 75% less polluted than indoor air. We fixed Rufus's ventilation system so that it delivers an effective 0.35 ACH. Lost productivity costs employers about $1,608 per employee per year. Productivity in the US is about $34.02 per hour. Therefore, ventilation can save approximately $422 per employee per year. And in 2019, the average number of people per household was 2.52. Assuming that Rufus and his wife both work, or they did work, that's $844 a year in savings. The math isn't perfect. These are averages. Maybe the outside air is worse than 75% better than the inside air. Maybe Rufus doesn't run his ventilation system the way he should because no one taught him. But what we know for sure is that some mechanical ventilation is beneficial to his health. And it looks like just 1 year of improved health and productivity would pay for the bathroom fan. Maybe we can do a massive study of the health of the population living in tight houses with mechanical ventilation systems set to the ASHRAE required ventilation rates. But the bottom line is pretty simple. Mechanical ventilation saves money in terms of health and productivity costs. Let's make sure that Rufus can be healthy for all of his 79.61 years. Let's keep Rufus and his family healthy and productive. So now, for being such a wonderful audience, I'm going to award a signed copy of my novel, Death at the Edge of the Diamond, to the first person who can enter in the chat the ideal range of relative humidity in a house. And then I'll see if Jeff has any questions for me.
Okay. So we do have some questions. Let me know when you're ready for some of those.
I'm ready. As long as they're easy questions.
So one of them might have been a wisecrack, I'm not sure, but it was all those solid fuels up there. I think that was talking about the life expectancy in Vermont and New York.
Oh.
So anyway, someone wrote, there is a code to vent garages. Now, is that a local code somewhere, or can you explain more about that?
It's a national code. It's about 100 CFM per bay.
Okay. 100 CFM per bay. All right. Now, is that just a vent through the wall of the garage?
They don't tell you what you're supposed to do with it.
Oh.
Or how long you're supposed to run it. That's just a number.
All right.
I can give you it is in table 403.3.1.1 in the International Mechanical Code.
Okay.
It's in my book, by the way.
Great. Well, we have, so Lisa Ritter is our winner.
All right.
So
congratulations, Lisa.
Great. Cool. So there are a lot of requests for the links to the videos and websites that you list. I assume, well, this session will be on our website, and people can go to it and open it up and get them from that. But is there any other way you suggest people get the links?
I can send out the links, but I did try to put the ones that I were referencing right on the slides.
Yep. So they'll be on the slides, which will be accessible for 9 months, I believe, at least. So that's great. Yeah, a lot of good stuff there. Okay. Oh, okay. So somebody made a comment. I think you talked about it, but we've got time to elaborate. Is it actually healthy to live in a sterile environment? I think you said no, but
No,
yeah,
no. I mean, if it's perfectly sterile, you won't have the microbiome connections. I mean, you saw from Kevin Kennedy's advice to go outside and kiss a dog, and you know, all of those things are all part of in the Never Home Alone book from Rob Dunn. It's extraordinary how he relates actually people living in more sterile environments to people that don't. So it's like the difference in how the dust in Amish houses are actually healthier for the people than the ones living in closed apartments with sealed windows.
yep, yeah, great. It's kind of counterintuitive, I think, to some, but it makes a lot of sense.
Well, I think that, Jeff, I think that's really true. And what's been happening is we've been tightening up our houses more and more in the extreme effort of trying to save energy, but it's disconnecting us from other things.
Yeah, that's great. So definitely want to let folks know that the links for this session, we'll post the recording for the video. We'll share the links. Got a comment from Andy Etu from our Energy Out West board that Paul has the best mustache in the network. So
I should
not get that feedback.
Yeah, it's been there since 1966.
Good. There was something else here. Sorry, I'm losing my train of thought. No other questions this time. Oh, there was a lot of people asking about the names of your books. So I assume the bio that I read is in our Energy Out West. If you go to our app, there is a bio of all the speakers, and Paul's listed there. And I hope his books are listed there. But I think you have other novels, non-weatherization books too, that you've actually showed some pictures of. Will they get a list of all your books somewhere?
Yeah, that I'm sorry, that author's website that I have up on the screen now. If you go to that, that's my website that has my books in it and other odds and ends, including a place to buy the books if you want to.
Okay, great. So we, surprisingly, we do not have, oh, wait, are these costs part of what is calculated into the non-energy benefits of weatherization? Are these costs? I don't know what they mean by these costs. Maybe you could take that.
Yeah, I would have to leave that to the weatherization program experts because I don't run an agency, so I don't know what's in those. Do you, Jeff?
Uh,
There are there
yeah, I
none?
know in our state, we know there's a lot of non-energy benefits of weatherization. We just don't have the ability here in Vermont to calculate, at least in our office. Our Department of Health has done some studies which have been really helpful, but I think that's something DOE or each individual state could answer. So yeah, we are getting questions as we talk, so that's good. Is there a significant energy loss related to whole house ventilation?
No. Ventilation systems, depending on which expert you talk to, cost between a dollar and $1.50 per CFM per year in both energy, electrical energy, as well as conditioned air energy. So it's pretty cheap, and especially since it it keeps you from getting sick. It's very
Really good. Okay, we're getting some questions. This is good. I've got two. One is why throw out nonstick pans, and that's a question was a question of mine as well. And also, can you expand a bit more on your thoughts on COVID and the balance of being safe and staying healthy? How much should we be sanitizing versus cleaning?
Okay. Well, in terms of nonstick pans, I think you'd have to ask Kevin Kennedy that question. He's much more versed in it than I am, but it has to do with the chemicals that are in the nonstick coatings that get cooked into the food. But as far as there are transmission levels, there's the transmission level called fomite, which is basically when the COVID bacteria get on surfaces and you pick them up on your hands, is a much lower transmission rate than airborne for people sneezing and coughing. So a moderate amount of cleaning is a good idea, but it's not breathing on people. That's a much better transmission path.
Great. Okay. So another comment here. Oak Ridge National Laboratory published the details from the national evaluation. Someone said, I would love to see the updated numbers. I think they're talking about the non-energy benefits, I believe.
Oh, cool.
But, secondhand question to me, or comment. So I think that's it, unless anybody has more. So I guess that's just in time for some final housekeeping. And notes here. Definitely want to thank you, Paul. I know I learned a lot today. That was really interesting stuff, and I look forward to delving into some of those websites and those videos that are shared in your PowerPoint.
Thanks, Jeff.
Sure, thank you. So to ensure BPI credits for this session, please follow the link in the chat and complete the survey. For all of you watching, don't forget to join in the rest of our live sessions, as well as watch the sessions in our pre-recorded video library. So that's on the left side. When you go into the Blackboard, you can pick the pre-recorded sessions. There's a bunch of good ones in there, as well as you can watch these live ones a day later. They'll be posted over there as well. And you can get BPI credits for the recorded and the live. So I want to thank you all for participating, and thank Paul once again. That was great, and hope you stay tuned. There's another session coming up soon and tomorrow as well. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks.